In three, two, one. Boom. We are officially live. How, what made you go from being an arts and culture student to doing a PhD in computer science?
Well, I had a passion for technology since before choosing to study music and the arts at university. And I was lucky enough that in my curriculum there were some courses in computer science and multimedia production, like not much, but definitely some. And I chose to do my thesis with the professors that were teaching those subjects. So my interest was clear. Then, of course, to transition, it's not obvious that they would just accept you in the program. In fact, I had tried to enter some PhD programs in musicology and I failed. I tried 3-4 different places in a couple of years. And then I just did something else. So I have a gap between my master's degree and my PhD. I started my PhD when I was 28, 29. And I was a musician, guess, of all things. So, of course, my interests have always been clear. It's technology and the arts. And I started collaborating with a research project in 2009, doing something very practical. I was helping out. I was a research assistant, literally, in that I was doing something technical to support the researchers. And because that let me set a foot back into academia, and the project was in collaboration with the Department of Computer Science of the University of Verona in Italy, then, I was already close to that environment, and that made it easier for me to be known and to be wanted, to be supported. They say, why don't you apply for a PhD? And I said, I would really like to. Do you think I could get in? I mean, I have a master's degree in something completely different. And I think it goes to their credit that they were open-minded enough in Verona to accept motivated students with a different background to pursue a PhD in computer science like myself. And there was someone else coming from the field of psychology there. So actually, back to your answer, passion. My passion has always been technology and the arts. I haven't changed my mind after my master's.
So your passion's been technology and computers all the time. Then, like, what made you not do that in the beginning? I'm just curious to know
Sure.
what made you make the decision to not directly get into computer science as your bachelor's and towards your PhD.
Yeah, well, first of all, since when I was in middle school, I was doing anything technological that I could and following courses that were even not meant for children of my age then. But then, sure,
Like,
like Morse code, telecommunications, being into radios and
wow.
Citizens Band, stuff like that. I wanted to learn how to weld and solder and do circuits and play around with that stuff. But my father wouldn't really support that because he thought I was at that age when you need to be trained in the classics and Latin and literature, culture that you will, you know, have with yourself for life when you're still building your personality and all. And that kind of technical stuff you can always learn later on in life. Yeah, I get it, but I still hold it against him that he didn't let me pursue what was clearly my interest even back then. And when I was 18, 19 and finished with high school, I did consider going to a program in engineering. But the main answer is that I would have had to move to another city, whereas music and musicology was right there in the city where I was already living. So that made a difference in financial terms for my family to support me. And so I chose music.
So basically, your passion was in technology all the time, but you still decided to go into arts and music.
Yes, I was extremely passionate about music.
Wow.
Very
Like, I don't
rewarding.
want to say this to you, but in India, it's the opposite. I mean, if you were in India, most parents would love to let you do anything related to technology and put you in science because that's cool in India. It's much way cool to be in doing something in technology than studying about arts and crafts. Like that's what I think, and that's what um I've I've had friends around myself who always have behaved that way, like who've always liked science and technology more than arts and culture. And in arts, it's generally not even arts, there's history, and there's a lot of culture.
Well, I never
So
said my parents encouraged me to become an artist. I don't know that any parents loves to do that. You know, they let me free enough to pick something. They would have probably been happier with engineering, because when you study law, engineering, or medicine, you end up having a real job, right? A decent job, a
right.
respectable job. I studied music because I loved it. I was gonna do something with my life eventually. I also worked as a journalist. I was a teacher. You find something. It's not that I want, yes, okay, no, I confess, I wanted to be an artist, in fact.
You wanted to be an artist, wow.
Yes, but around the time I was precisely 28, after pursuing music, trying to make it as a musician, to pay my bills with music, I realized that I was just struggling, and that, well, that's for another story. I told this story on another podcast, but that was just about time to realize that I needed a real job. And that's when, by pure coincidence, I think I was so lucky. I was, saved last minute by this opportunity to collaborate with a research project. I got, so excited to be in contact with the research environment again. And I started a PhD, and I never thought that I could love it so much, more than music, to which I had devoted my life. And I ended up working in academia for the next 10 years, which is up until now, until 2020, basically.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Right. So how did you feel when you first got into research? Like, what was your first day like? Do you want to talk about it?
Oh, first, sure. It was April 1st, 2009. I remember. And I felt like this huge responsibility to be part of a community that I respected so much that I couldn't believe that, especially for me, that you're asking me. I got to speak from my experience. I was coming from being a singer and entertainer until 4 or 5 months prior in Egypt, of all places. And now here I was back in Italy, walking to, my desk space right there for me on day one to start doing exciting things with other people, learning a lot. And I just loved it. The first day, the first day, what's special about the first day? We worked. I can tell you that. I mean, they, I guess, showed me around the basic things when the printer was, but we immediately went down to work. And I just loved waking up and going to work every day, to the point actually that initially I tried to resist going during the weekends because the most people would not be there, but the department would still be open. I had a badge to get in, and initially, despite my enthusiasm, I would fight my will to go and do more work because I was just so excited about it. And then slowly I gave in and I started going there Sundays afternoons. And I actually started a period of overworking myself quite a bit. That's also how, my CV is pretty long. I've done a lot of things, and that's how. I'm not recommending that anyone else does that. Some people in research will do that. This is a job that you do out of passion. Nobody, points a gun at your head and say, you'll be a researcher. You cannot be an innovative, creative researcher if you don't have the drive for it. And so from day one, it's just been an escalation of more hours at work, but it's all been such a fantastic ride. Tremendous, incredible. The fact that you can travel, being in academia, looking back at this decade, it's amazing because you can travel. Normally, you are reimbursed for all those trips. you meet people from all over the world that are normally equally driven in what they do. And you realize, especially looking back after a decade, that beside the intellectual journey, which has been so amazing, this has changed me as a person. This has prepared the terrain for me being a science communicator right now, for example, but just what it did to me as a person. So for me, it's been grand. It's been fantastic. I did not plan it in advance. Many people talk today about having a clear vision, a clear plan, a strategy, because otherwise, how can you get what you want if you don't know what you want? I did not plan to switch from music to computer science. I always followed my passions, and as you progress, if you give your 100% at each step of the way, I think that doors open and even doors manifest themselves that you didn't know were there. This is my non-strategy for life.
Right. Like again, like you said, like follow your passion. I mean, with me, like, it's different for different people. Like different people have different passions for different durations. Some people have a passion for their entire life. Some people have a passion for a few weeks. Some people have a passion that changes every 6 months, which is why I see, if you were ever a kid, um, let's say you ever said, let's say for example, that hey, you love playing badminton, then your parents get you all that equipment, and a few months later you're like, oh, I don't like it anymore. Then you try to switch your sport and get into, let's say, I don't know, basketball, and then they get your basketball. For some people like that, but for me it was more like my passion, like I wouldn't call it my passion, but my hobbies, they change every 4 to 5 years. Like let's talk about video editing. I started editing like videos when I was, I think, 14, 15 years old in my 10th grade. I used to just watch YouTube videos and wonder how they put in those effects of, turning the video around and everything. That's how I learned it myself. Like I didn't do an additional course that would teach me how this stuff works. I figured it out myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like when you talk about passion and hobbies, that with you it was a good thing that you had a pretty long term passion for like your entire life. And I think that's great because you had multiple passions, and I really like that.
Yeah, true. I've had other passions, but I wouldn't call them passions. They're fleeting things.
They're
Like
hobbies.
I played different instruments. I have even the Morse code thing. I
Mm-hmm.
pursued seriously for a couple of months, and now I just probably remember how to do SOS. And maybe some vowels. Okay, you're left with some vague knowledge, but you just let it go. And other things, learning languages, for example. I was really into Portuguese at some point, and because I've lived in
Wow.
Belgium during the past 4 or 5 years, I really wanted to practice my Dutch. But I didn't reach a level that I could maintain now that I'm back in Italy, for example, due to COVID.
Hmm.
So maybe I will just forget more and more. Yeah, sure, but those two things have always remained, music and technology. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, do you have something like that that never changed in your life that drives you?
That drives me. Like I was saying, like my passions change every 4 to 5 years, and that gives me enough time to learn something. Like for video editing, like today, I'm so good enough. If you ever open up my LinkedIn or any of my social media platforms, I'm able to create a lot of micro content, which I'll be doing after this episode for LinkedIn and Instagram. So I pretty much like that. Like, I may not love it as much as I did before, but there's just something about it that still keeps me going. And I think for me, that's the result. Like I'm driven by the process and a part of the result. And I think that's what, like, my passion just, I think I only need passion to get me started. I
Right.
and I just need the compatibility with the process and the satisfaction with the results to just keep myself going.
That's just about right. When
Yeah.
kids have an interest for something and their parents support it, I think that their parents should maybe, depending on the situation, encourage that they keep at it for a little while. Because in
Right.
order to get the reward from certain things, you need to get a little bit good at it, and that takes time. That goes
Mm-hmm.
beyond the initial enthusiasm. And
It
then you
goes beyond the
realize,
initial enthusiasm.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Like
things are hard.
coming back to your
Yeah.
question, now I remember like I used to study German and I was very good at it. Like I could understand every single thing that was going on. I think I was 12 or 13 years old when I started learning German. They just got it up in my school that if anybody wants to learn, they can learn it. And again, obviously, first they took an entrance test. I didn't do well. Then I took external tuitions, and that's how I started learning German. And then eventually, I got back in my school classes. So now I was learning it as a proper subject in my school, and I was taking extra tuitions for it. I mean, I learned every single thing possible. And like here in Pune, they have the Goethe Institute, and they had this festival in which they were gonna show us movies in German. So I remember watching Tom Sawyer in German, and I understood every single word of it.
I'm so
I mean,
impressed. My German is so poor, so hard.
yeah. And again, like I cleared my exam, like I cleared my A1, then my A2, like the student level, but Fit 1 and Fit 2. But again, that was 8th and ninth grade. But then it's been like 5 years, so I don't know much. I cannot speak as fluently as I could back then, but I can still hear a few words and at least I can figure out what's going on in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I just read a little bit more, I think I'll be good enough again. I don't know. I guess I think even you will be good enough in Portuguese. Just pick up a book.
Well,
That's just what I think.
then you'll have to consider that my primary language is Italian, which is pretty close to Portuguese, especially from the
Hmm.
language you start from, and German. So, congratulations on that. Would you call that a passion, though? A passion for German,
No, I
or it's
think I
for
would call it an ability.
Yeah, it's a
An
yeah.
ability because in India, like we have so many languages, right? I mean, I know Hindi and Marathi, right? So like Hindi is a language that a lot of people almost throughout the northern part of the country speak, and
Mm-hmm.
Marathi is something they speak in Maharashtra, meaning near Mumbai and Pune, where I'm from. So you need to know these two languages. Then obviously, since I'm in an English medium school where the primary language is English, that's English. So like I know three languages. So it just became a habit for me, an ability to learn new languages. It became a necessity. As an Indian, like I feel like you have to learn new languages, and it just sort of comes to us. And I think that's how I was able to learn German.
Have you ever put it to use besides watching movies at the Goethe Institute? Have you traveled to Germany or had German friends? Have you
I haven't
practiced
had the
it?
opportunity for that. I mean, I've been to Sweden. Yeah, but again, I was able to understand part of the language because it was kind of similar to German. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know why, but those words sounded familiar. So I could understand a few words and I could just assume, but again, it's wrong to assume. It might end up being something else.
Sure. You made me think what a passion really is, because I've had many uh, interests similar to that of that you've had for German, but a passion is
Hmm.
maybe something that you cannot not do. German, you say, I like it, I'd like to learn it. Why not? I have the opportunity. I will give it a try. A passion is really something that needs to drive you, that eats you from the inside if you don't do it, that keeps you up at night. You lose sense of time when you do
Yeah.
it. That's a passion. And yeah,
What was like it for you? Like, were you up at night during researching that? Oh my God. I
sure.
just don't want to sleep. You want to go up there next morning? Have you ever felt like that?
Yes, big yes, yes. At home, endless times, and also just staying overnight at the lab. And, some colleagues coming in the morning, looking at you,
Mhm.
feeling sorry for you, and others in awe. But yeah, and I wasn't the only one sometimes, because there's so many driven people in research. It's amazing to see someone with a deadline or a big project. So, well, definitely, definitely. I guess that person by nature, I tend to indulge. in those types of behavior. I overdo it. I'm obsessive. I pursue something until it's done. Like, I don't let go until it's done. Doesn't matter what day it is, what time it is. I just keep doing it. Yeah. It was the same with music before and then during my years as a researcher. Not sure that this is this interesting? Does that anyone resonate with this? What was the payoff of this, or am I weird? I don't know, but I am like that. I am like that.
I think it's cool.
I'm relentless. I'm a machine. When something needs to be done, I will get it done, you know.
Yeah. Like, speaking of getting things done, I also heard about your podcast, Technoculture. I was just going through some of your episodes. I don't know, like, that's a pretty amazing picture of you. It's like half of you and then a robot on the other side.
Yes.
I think it was pretty cool.
And it's a face paint. Some people think it's photoshopped. It was actually painted on my face. Beautiful.
Wow.
I wish it was permanent.
Who painted that? Did you do that yourself or you got somebody else to do
Oh,
it?
no, absolutely. I couldn't do it myself. This was a very talented makeup artist in Ghent, Belgium.
Wow. So, I mean,
We
I've
can
seen like
link her somewhere. Yeah. On my podcast website, in the credits, you definitely find all her contact info and other works. She's amazing. That was fantastic work.
Okay. Wow. So, I mean, I've still seen you. I saw your latest episode, which was in 2021, April. So how was your first episode like? What was the feeling before you were gonna record your first episode? And how different did you feel after the recording was done?
So the first episode I recorded is not episode number 1 that you see on the website. Because you know yourself, having a podcast, you want to record a couple of episodes before you release the first one. So I did that. I think I had 4 or 5 recorded before I released the first one. And I ended up releasing first, not the first I recorded. So I remember that the very first I recorded, I went to the guest in person. I wasn't doing video yet though then, so the interview is just published as audio. And I remember only having one microphone, and for too long a story, but for technical reasons, so I showed up with just one microphone, and I asked the guest to sit side by side with me to use the same microphone, which made it so embarrassing actually. And later on, I figured out a way not to have to do that, even with just one microphone. But that day I showed up at this big professor's office and we sat down, and he was very kind, but he didn't have much time. So I felt the pressure. We sat down, and I think that I don't know how good I am at what I do, but I know that when I start doing it, I'm really into the interview very much, and I forget about my worries, about me. Who cares about me if I'm scared or anything? I'm just focused on the guest, on what's interesting about what they're saying, and on the next question and how we can wrap this up. How long has it been? I keep an eye on time and all of that. And I can tell you that it's been a really interesting conversation, which has also always been the point of what I've been doing. We don't prove anything. It's really about having an interesting conversation. It's not a demonstration of anything. So in the moment when I'm there, I really ask questions that are curiosity driven, although I prepared before. But then in the flow, you always find something interesting to ask. And we went on for, I guess, just a little less than 1 hour. Towards the end, someone started drilling outside, because I'm always lucky that way. There's always some noises. And towards the end, then he left the room immediately when we were done, when I was, putting all my gear together again in the bag and everything. So I didn't have time to think and decompress until I was actually gone from the office. And I remember being overwhelmed with emotions like, oh my God, I did it. Oh my God, I did it. And technically, I did not have a podcast yet because it was not released. Nobody knew. I could have still changed my mind and said, no, 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 I cannot do this. But I loved it and I couldn't wait to go home and edit the episode. I wasn't doing much editing back then, to be honest. Then I learned the sweet spot, not to edit too much, but to do some editing out of respect for the listeners. And because the guest, you can make him or her, the guest, sound much better without distorting their style or message. So there's a sweet spot of editing right there. And my next interviews were different than that one because some were on Skype, so I was not with the guest in the same room.
Okay.
And I changed my setup, my equipment and my workflow along the 40-something episodes that I have out. But that was the first one. I was scared. I was scared to mess up. I was scared, sure. When was your first interview? And what number is this one with me?
This one's gonna be the second one. Like, say, like people
my
like
God.
they gather everything together and just put it together. For me, I'm just gonna record it and upload it whenever it's ready. I mean, eventually, I'm not gonna start recording so much over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that I can literally have proper planning on when I'm supposed to upload, and I can create a workflow. My first episode, it was I believe on May 10th. Right now on May 10th, with this student named Fardeen. I met him on Instagram. And I just asked him nicely that, hey, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? He said, sure. And I mean, my first episode, I was nervous. I mean, you're seeing me talk like this now with a proper mic and everything. Back then, I mean, I didn't even, I was just like, okay, I'm locked up in my room. I want to do something about it. I like the idea of distributing and passing on information and knowledge to audience, and that does not mean I like to teach, and that's what people get confused. I just like telling stuff and creating meaningful experiences for people. I mean, as a kid, I wasn't like I was somebody who would be called an introvert, but it doesn't bother me as much anymore, because I'm kind of working towards being more balanced. I mean, I don't want to be super introverted, but I don't want to be as extroverted as Donald Trump either.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
You don't want that.
Ouch.
So I just like to keep that balance.
Yes. I like to hear what you just said. And well, so you're just at the beginning. You look very confident.
Yes.
That's good for you. I like what
Thank
you
you.
said. I like what you said about sharing good content and information. I think I have it somewhere hanging here on my walls, close to my podcast notes and ideas. It says to share a sense of wonder with the world, to learn new things and to consider them worth sharing. When you find something new that excites you, you want to share it. You want to tell someone how cool this is. And if you thought that is cool, you don't just say, oh, look at this. They say, hey, look at this, how cool this is. That's already moving some good energy, I think. I mean, it's valuable. So good for you.
It is very, very valuable. Right. So like this is like my second episode, but again, like my first episode, I didn't even have a mic. Like I didn't even know I had this mic and it actually works. So I use my iPhone and I connected it to my laptop. Like you can literally just plug it in and use your phone as a mic. That's what I did for my first episode. I was very, very nervous. I didn't know. I mean, if you've ever noticed, I stuttered a lot in the beginning of that very episode itself.
I don't think it was
But I think it's cool.
noticeable.
I mean, yeah, I felt that way because I mean, it's like when I'm speaking right now, I'm like, yeah, I sound good. But when you listen to your own voice, have you ever felt like that's not my voice? And what's your reaction to you when you listen to your voice?
It's still hard. It's still hard. The voice and sometimes just how I speak. I listen back. I listen back and I literally say, I have to ask someone else. I said, did that make sense? Did that make sense what I just said over there? So for a period of time, because I only had one microphone, I came up with this idea that I would go to my guests, only record their voice with the microphone, and my voice would still be in the recording, because even if I'm sitting far away from the microphone, you can, hear yourself, but softly, just as a reminder, as a note of what the question was. And I would go home and cut all of those pieces of audio out and re-record my questions, so I could also re-record them the proper way without repeating
I think
myself.
that's good. Like,
I,
that's your strategy.
You have to get good at doing it. I don't think I always did it in an optimal way, but those episodes I started sensing what good content is. I don't think that I'm really rambling right now, but there is a specific way of delivering specific content. We're still chatting right now, but when you were talking about something
Right.
specific, that's scientific, that you want to explain a theory, share an idea, there is a very nice way, like they speak in documentaries, you would say, that is almost like
Right.
reading from a textbook. It needs to flow, it needs to be clear. There are no in between, or repetitions, or looking for words. And by re-recording my questions, I was able to sound like I always knew what I was saying, because the process allowed for it. Then I
So,
started
like,
doing video.
pre-recording works for you, and then you start
It
video.
did work, yeah. And then I started video, and I realized that it was just the way to go. I loved it. I still love it. But it limits you in what you can do in editing. For example, right now, right here, I could not add a sentence because I wouldn't have footage of myself. And I can cut, but you would notice maybe jerky movements in the video. So you can do some of that for sure, but not too much. Then you
Right.
don't need to edit as much when you do video, because if I make a small pause, but you see me on video, it won't be as bad on your ears as if you were only listening to me. Then silence, you say, what's going on? Why is she silent? But you see me thinking maybe, or showing where my walls are, where my note, it's more dense with information, video. That's what I like about it. But it's all a different approach. I don't know. This is not how to do it. This is how I do it out of experience. What I found that works for me. I admire people that can produce almost extemporaneously content for platforms like TikTok or Instagram. I'm not good at just grabbing my phone and recording right there and then in the street or in my car, 1 minute of content. I'm not good at doing that. I'm a fan of prepare, record, produce.
I just wanted to ask you before we go ahead with other things. When you talk about your show Technoculture, what made you decide that you want to start a show, and what exactly you spoke about to talk? What was the conversation with your audience like, your guest like?
Yes, what prompted me to start my own podcast? I don't think that there's ever an easy answer to that. I know that a combination of things. I was listening to podcasts then. I had basically just discovered the power of the spoken word like that, like in your ears wherever you go, on the train, on the bus, which we've had this technology for many years, but for some reason it takes some time for something to become mainstream. And so during the past years, it was, say, easier to carry this content around, and at the same time there was more content available. So I was definitely listening to hours and hours of content, and I realized that I love it, that it's powerful, that I want more, that I admire people who do it. And at the same time, I was traveling a lot for my research work, and I was visiting labs that were not doing the same specific thing that I was doing research-wise. So I would have many conversations with people that were working in nearby fields doing different things, and conversations would get really interesting because we didn't know each other's fields. We would ask, what is this? What do you do? How does that work? And there is a difference between a casual conversation when you ask questions to the other person and an interview, but it can be a fine line sometimes. And so at some
Right.
point, I can tell you what prompted me to really start a podcast, because I had the idea and I was thinking, who would ever listen? How could I make it as interesting and as the things that I'm listening to? Why put myself out there? I would just add noise to what's out there. I wasn't self-confident enough to do it. And then one day I listened to a podcast. I completely forgot which one it was. Don't ask me. I sincerely forgot. I'm not going to say
That's
something
okay.
nice
Even
about it.
I don't remember what was the first podcast that drove me to start one for myself.
So I listened
Now it
to
hasn't even been a month and I forgot.
right. That was for me 2018 for sure. Must have been early 2018. And I remember observing that the host was lucky enough to have a famous guest. And instead of kind of being humble and asking questions to the guest who was the expert on the topic of the day, he started having a conversation with the guest as if he was a peer of the guest. I did not appreciate that very much, because I thought, my impression, that he was saying some platitudes without knowing it, probably just out of some ignorance. And I thought it's perfectly fine to be ignorant and it's perfectly fine to ask questions, but you cannot expect to have an expert on your show, you're the host of the show, and start debating your guest. And so why did that prompt me to start my own? Because I disapproved of that so much. I said, well, if this guy does a podcast, so can I, and that prompted me to start a couple of things in my life the same way. I resisted, not being self-confident enough. And then I just see someone else do it and I thought they were horrible, or, I thought something not very flattering about them. And that gave me courage to do it myself. So thank you guys for those examples, because if they do it, then so can I. And so I decided to put together my own show. What do I want to say? Low profile, just in a humble way. I try to do it the best I can. Especially, I try to do it how I loved it. I wasn't trying to please anyone else. This was my brainchild. I thought, if I had a podcast, how would I like it to be? And I thought, what really interests me so much that I don't get bored after 3 episodes? What is that combination of topics and elements and people, and that keeps me interested in the first place? And then had to come the title, the name, the graphics, the list of guests. Some people look for guests, and I understand depending on your topic. In fact, you may need to look for guests. I never had to look for guests. Right. I always knew who I wanted to interview. I always had a long list of people. And so it's how I put it together. And the timeline went from deciding to doing it in May 2018 to releasing my first episode at the end of September or October, something like that, in the fall of 2018. So I spent the summer working on it.
Wow. That's interesting. You spent a lot of time. Oh, by the way, I think we should go ahead and give a huge shout out to matchmakers for introducing us to each other.
That's true. Yes, they do a great service.
Yeah, we would have met each other otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's a great service. Yeah, absolutely. That's how we got in touch.
Right. And I think, again, like, there are lots of ways to get guests, but I really think that matchmakers.fm is a great platform for anybody to get their first guest in case they're struggling to find their very first few guests. I mean, the best part about it is that you are asking people to be a guest. And I mean, there's a reason the guests are there on the platform. They're there to be guests. So the probability of them saying no really comes down, unless, they are in a completely different topic, and then they talk about completely different stuff. There's a really low possibility that they would say no to you.
Well, the feature I love the most is that Matchmaker also does some automatic matching, and it just suggests possible podcasts and possible guests. So you get to learn about new podcasts, discover new shows. And as a podcaster, you may also have guests that pitch themselves to you. and say, hey, I would like to be on your show. That must feel awesome when it happens.
I know, that feels awesome. I mean, I've had a few. I don't want to like rank show, but again, like I've got one or two people who've asked me if they could be a guest on my show.
Yes.
So I told them that yeah, I will let them know, because this week I'm really packed. Like I have got episode recordings back to back. Like I have one today, I have another one tomorrow. I have one every single day in the evening.
I know the feeling.
So if I were to ask you what you spoke about when you said technoculture, you interviewed people about technology. So do you remember exactly like what different kind of technology you spoke about with them?
Oh, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't just talk about technology per se. It's always about how technology impacts our lives, the use that humans make of technology. So sometimes we may, yes, start talking about a technology, but then talk about some social scenarios or focus on a specific research that is being done in space exploration or in cybersecurity. Or I talked about cultural heritage in an episode because now it's all digital. So, you know, the combination of culture, which is meaning for us humans, and what it means to have it all represented in zeros and ones and stored somewhere. What about access? What about distribution? So it's very broad as a topic. I spoke to very different people. I went to NASA in California. When I was there, I could visit in person. So we spoke about their research in Antarctica. And then I've been to, to Norway to talk with a Viking archaeologist that gave a very interesting perspective on how to use the tools that Vikings were using, which is technology, if you think about it, the tools that they were using back then.
That is technology.
That is technology. Of course, when we say technology today, we mostly think of digital technology, communication technology, but in a broad sense, glasses are technology. Really, I mean, you have to draw a line because then anything is a tool, and a fork is technology. But the parallel, the specific parallel that I found was very interesting in that episode is that technology, our technology, digital technology, evolves so rapidly that it's not outlandish to think that in a not too far future, some people will have the same type of desire to relive the experience of being alive in 2021 or 1990 and to use those devices, you know, the Nintendo with those graphics, with the big pixels, or the phones without a screen. How was it? Or a computer with only green tones on the screen. I know it seems silly to us because we have seen this stuff. I have seen it. I'm 40 years old. But in another 50 years or 100 years, this stuff will look ancient. And maybe people will wonder, how was it to use this stuff? Even how was it to send something with a fax machine, maybe. And I feel that what we sometimes do with this Viking culture and technology, for example, is the exact same type of time travel, technological time travel we may want to do someday back to our times. That was that episode was about. So sorry, I made this a bit long, but you see, I covered a lot of ground on technocultures.
I know, and that was essential. I mean, people, like, I think people would like it if we this part, because I think we went deep with it. We went specific with what technology really means. We just explained to the audience what technology means. And I really hope that they start we are able to change the way they think on technology, and that it's not just the digital technology. I mean, who knows what might change in the future. I mean, I really firmly believe that like these AirPods, I don't want to say use them as a specific example, but a few years from now, even they would be like, oh, these things, they're not as fun anymore, they're boring and old, because something will replace the other.
Yes, sure. Even too
Mhm.
fast.
Yeah, it depends now. I mean, there are all these talks about artificial intelligence and everything that it may replace us in 5 years or whatever.
Yes.
So, what are your plans for the future? Like, what do you plan? Where do I see Federica in like 5 years? Like, what are you gonna be doing over the next 5 years? Do you have anything in plan? Like, even like a rough idea, not a specific plan, but where would you like to be in 5 years?
I should love that question, but I have mixed feelings because, as I explained in the beginning of this interview, it's not that I have a long-term strategy for doing things. I mostly tend to give 100% of myself to what I'm doing in the moment, and thus I find out about the next step. So I don't have a long-term vision normally. I know I'd like to be alive and healthy to begin with. But I have to add that COVID really killed any possibility for mid to long term planning. So my
Hmm.
personal approach plus COVID made it so that more than ever, probably today, even at my age at 40, I'm living day by day. And I just decided to just keep going with more interviews, both on video for the podcast, which everything was installed a little bit during 2020, because at the beginning of the pandemic, who knew it would last so long? So I just decided to
Mm-hmm.
hold on and wait and see when we can go back to normal as soon as possible. It hasn't happened. And so at this point, I decided to, you know, too bad I cannot always travel and meet my guests. I like
Hmm.
Zoom. There's nothing wrong with Zoom, but if I could travel, that would be better. So there's
It's
no more
much better.
waiting. So I will do more interviews very soon on Zoom and publish them for my podcast. It will all be in video. I have a couple of other projects cooking with different formats, trying to be creative and always love what you do. I know it's such a easy message to give. Who would tell you to do
Right.
what you hate? Who tells you to do what you hate? Nobody. But then
Nobody.
many people will just not do the opposite. I say do what you love. Like almost a moral imperative. Do what you love. So in 5 years from now, I don't really know where I'm going to be, but in the short future, I know that I have started investing in communication, science
Hmm.
communication, keeping my network alive, giving value to people, experts, and just because of their human value. It's just amazing. Just to let people shine, to be a facilitator, to give a platform the best way I can. That's what I plan to do. Like I said, let's hope that my theory keeps proving itself true, that then opportunities
I hope so.
arise and so on.
Right. Right. Wait, is this your first time as a guest
No,
on
but
any
almost.
podcast? Almost.
Almost. That it was a very recent realization that I could go and be a guest on other people's podcasts. And again, in the beginning, I resisted. And then I don't even know how the first interview came to be, actually, but I know that I was really nervous, and don't think that I'm not nervous now. It's a very, very different experience to be on your side of the screen and to be on my side of the screen.
Hmm.
I don't feel in control. Like, hey, you lead, and you think I'm interesting enough to share my experience? Okay, let's hope. No, it's not easy to be on this side, but I don't know. It's just something that I really thought was also valuable to do. And I sincerely hope that what I say is of any use for someone listening. It's sincere. I'm not here to prove anything like in my podcast. It's all about being
Hmm.
authentic. And it happens over time. You just keep doing what you
I mean,
love
eventually
and
they
then
will find out, right? Like what's going on. If you are not authentic, people will catch that eventually.
Yeah.
We need to stop thinking people are stupid. People are very, very smart.
Oh, thank God for
We
saying
have
that.
to give them credit for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like your listeners, the listenership, they're not a bunch of sheep, that need to be fed some sort of, easy content. They're smart. They can select the best content, follow their own interest, and spot who's authentic, who's not. I like what you
Mm-hmm.
said. Absolute respect for the listeners.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm not selling anything on top of that. Maybe if I had a book or something, or I'm not selling anything. So I think that because of where you come from, we are just truly exchanging a human experience, and that must have some value, no?
We are exchanging a human experience. Right. So, like listeners, um, how did you feel when people first started interacting with your podcast in form of like reactions and comments? Not just your audience, but also around you, your family, friends, and family members. How did you feel?
It always floors me when someone writes something good about the podcast. It's not such a popular podcast that I would have haters, because haters give you a lot of their time and energy. I mean, so my podcast has never been like the target of such harsh criticism. I have received some positive feedback, and when it happens, it always takes me aback. Like, it always embarrasses me a little bit because I don't know what to respond. At first, when I see that there has been a comment, I'm just terrified. I would not want to read it. I'm so scared. And sometimes when it's good, I almost feel like if they praise the interview, well, they rarely say about something about me personally. They say something about the interview or the podcast. I almost feel that they're talking about something that has nothing to do with me. It's something detached. It's something external from me that almost I could look with them and say, yeah, that was good, or that's not good, because I'm extremely critical of my products. So it's not that I'm immune from self-criticism to begin with. And when someone else sees some value in the interviews or in one question that I asked in an interview and takes the time to say it, well, no, I don't think that I have processed that type of feeling yet. I don't know what to do with that. It just if there is a positive way to be paralyzed with too much emotion, that's what I get. I don't know what to do with it, but I save them. I normally screenshot the comments, even if I know they're still online, but so that I have them all in one place. Some interviews were more praised than others. I don't think that they were better or worse interviews. It depended on the guest and on the following that the guest himself or herself had. And something that made me extremely proud is that when I prepare for an interview, I always try to find questions that have not been asked before, or not too many times. I try to not replicate anything that is already out there, and I ask myself, what questions could I ask this guest that only I could ask? What comes out of me? What is my specific perspective? And sometimes, especially for some popular guests, their followers also watched my interview and they made a comment that either, oh, finally somebody was asking about that, or someone found the right angle to ask about that. And that made me extremely proud, because I thought, you see, yeah, I'm doing something unique. Only I could do that. I delivered it. I took a risk, and they received it, received the message.
So you asked unique questions like nobody would ask them before. So
Yes.
you think that made a difference in your podcast?
Well, I
That
think that
sounds
there
really
are,
interesting.
if you're an expert
I mean, how
in,
do you think of those questions? Like, did you like literally think like what was your experience like when you were thinking of these questions?
that's an interesting question. You prepare, you expose yourself to as much material as possible that the guest has online, or you read their papers. If there's anything, ask them to send you some material to prepare. And you expose yourself to that. You go through it with an open mind, absolutely, and you take notes. It's really like absorbing stuff. And that absorption will do something to you. You will disagree with something, or you will really like something they said. And you take notes and you let yourself spontaneously react to that. And some questions may come spontaneously, because you say, oh, I wonder. And the interview that you're watching or listening to did not go in that direction. So you say, oh, I'm left with that question. I will ask them when I have a chance. And sometimes you have to come up with some topics. They don't really just come like that. And I just always, the approach I have is as spontaneous as possible. Maybe then I refine it rationally, but most of my working hours are spent staring into the void normally. Sometimes, you don't think. You are thought, and you let things emerge from within. And you say, what would I like to hear in this interview if I saw it as someone in the audience? What would I like? What would work? What is interesting? Because we don't want to do boring things.
Correct.
And so that's how I look for my answers. They always come. They're always genuine questions. And if sometimes a guest has been asked the same questions over and over, just because if you're an expert in topic Z, it's obvious that everyone is going to ask you those things. And if interviews are short, especially guests that go on mainstream media, very, very popular platforms, and have a short time on air, they will always be asked the very same question that is very superficial. And as a podcaster, you have as much time as you want. You want to dig deeper. Sometimes I will ask them, is there something about the topic that you're an expert in that, let's assume, of course, you're passionate about, that you are not being asked enough? Is there something that is being under-talked? Something, that you would like me to ask you? And then we talk about it. I won't just say, of course, sure, maybe someone wants to plug a book or something. No, but I will ask them. Do you think that from topic Z, that I'm not an expert in, there's an aspect that has not been highlighted enough? Also, let your guest help you in finding the topics. Sometimes they don't need to be questions. They just need to be topics. And you say, can you tell me a little bit more about this? How this relates to that? Or something happens in the news and then it's COVID everywhere, and you ask two experts in several fields how they can contribute to getting us out of COVID, how COVID impacted that research field, that industry or business.
Okay. That was a very interesting insight, man. I mean, wow. I really like the idea of, asking them unique questions that you wouldn't get to hear otherwise. I mean, that's why podcasts are there, right? I mean, there's a reason podcasts are now are being looked at as an alternative to mainstream media for information.
Yes.
Because you can get so much more knowledge and a lot of more of their experiences than you would otherwise on anywhere. Like you would see them in public, because it becomes repetitive and boring.
Absolutely.
All right. So yeah. Oh my God. I think we'll wrap up now. It's been an hour.
Yeah.
So
Who's a
right.
talker? Yes.
So we'll just conclude. I'll just ask you one last question right now, and then we'll just put an end to this. Because okay. Right. Like we actually had a plan. I think we had a plan to go for like 30 minutes, but now we're like at an hour. So I think let's just wrap this up. What would be 3 lines you would like to leave the audience with?
3 lines.
Yeah, like just 3 sentences or 3 phrases that you would like to share with the audience.
I would say awesome platitudes. Oh gee, we're going to edit this out, aren't we?
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Yes, we are. So look, so
Yeah, we may edit this part out, the
we
last part
may,
especially.
we
We
may, or
may.
we may not. We'll see. Well, I have tattoos on my arms. One tattoo on my left arm says, "Stay human." And for someone who's so much in technology, it may sound funny, but stay human. I don't have to
Stay
comment
human.
the lines. You just said leave the listeners with 3 lines, no comments. Stay human. On my right arm, my tattoo says, "Trust the process." You know, what I said before actually about podcasts, this share a sense of wonder with the world. Or the same thing in reverse, life is people, to the title of an album of a singer-songwriter I like, and it's also just a phrase. I mean, life is people. Life is a team sport. Here's another.
Wow, that's 4. I think that's 4 or 5, but that was
Yeah.
really awesome.
Well,
Yeah. Thank you, Federica. It meant a lot for me to come on my show. I mean, I've just started, and again, like most of my videos are going to be like, "Hey, this show's about cybersecurity." I don't want to keep it just about cybersecurity. I want to keep it about life and technology as well. I don't want people to just listen to cybersecurity and just take out the notebooks and stuff and use this as a reference.
yes.
I actually want them to not just learn something but also feel something. I mean, I don't think you can learn anything without actually feeling part of it.
Oh man,
I
what a
have
beautiful thing. Yes.
yeah, I have never, like, in school when I used to read history, I have never read any, let's say if you're talking about the independence movement of of India or the French Revolution. I mean, I could not understand it without actually feeling what it would have been like.
That's amazing. I'll
Yeah.
keep that with me. I don't just want people to learn something, but to feel something. Fantastic. I wish that you have a long way ahead of you in this world of broadcasting. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having me on. It's my pleasure. I quite never feel up to
Thank
the task. So we did this together. We help each other move forward. I thank you so much. Such a
Right.
pleasure to speak to you.
Thank you. Have a nice day, man. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You too. Bye bye, everyone. Thank you.